Thank you, Brenda, for that introduction. A special thanks to everyone in DDI for their work with SBIA. This is an incredible program. And thanks to Jeff and his staff as well for putting this together. Actually, I need to go back one slide. There we go. Because I have lots of data to show you, but what I want to caution you with the data that I show you is some of the data has different cutoff dates than other data. So I've presented things by fiscal year. I have other things possibly by calendar year and other types of cutoff dates. This is the outline of my presentation, and I'm just going to jump right into the very first thing. I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about the generic drug program at the FDA and some of the roles involved there. And I want to do this because, one, there are some new people here, and also we are seeing more companies coming into the generic space, and they may not be familiar with the generic drug program. And I see blogs and other things in the trade press sometimes that basically says, well, OGD did this. It may very well have been another office involved in the generic drug program and not OGD. So the generic drug program at FDA, our work related to ANDA, which is an abbreviated new drug application or a generic drug application, our work, our review, and our assessment, and our approval encompasses complex scientific, regulatory, and legal issues that are unique to the Hatch-Waxman space. Hatch-Waxman is the piece of legislation that actually allowed for generics in the United States. This complexity necessitates broad interactions across multiple offices. As a matter of fact, across all the offices in CDER and many offices in FDA. I've used this wheel picture to depict the generic drug program. I have OGD listed in the center because we are the office that interfaces the most with the applicant to coordinate ANDA review. I also have OPQ listed because we work on a daily basis with OPQ on ANDA review and assessment. OGD is the office, though, that issues the regulatory action to the applicants. So the decisions on that application, those letters come from OGD. But the program involves every single office in CDER. And it also involves other offices outside of CDER. The Office of Regulatory Affairs, that's the office that does inspections. The Office of the Commissioner, especially the Office of Chief Counsel. These are the most complex legal issues that the agency deals with, and that's why OCC is part of the program. And other centers, for example, the Center for Devices. Think about complex drug-device combinations. They're a part of the generic drug program. So this is FDA's generic drug program. You guys are all part of the generic drug program too. Everyone who is developing generic drug products, submitting applications, the consultants, the legal advice and such that industry gets, you're all part of the generic drug program too. So welcome to our big, huge dysfunctional family. Thank you. Although I will say, this is an exceptionally functional, highly performing program, and I'm going to spend some time walking you through that. You will hear from the Office of Management. They will be coming and talking about fees. You will hear from CDER's Office of Strategic Programs. That's the group that deals with electronic submissions and data standards. Again, illustrating to you that the generic drug program is an agency program. It is not OGD. This is OGD. This is our organizational chart. We are a super office reporting directly to Dr. Woodcock, the center director. We are comprised of 4 sub-offices and 12 subdivisions. I will allow you to take time on your own to look through this because Jeff has the clock ticking for me. This is the current state of the generic drug program at the agency. As I said, it is a highly functioning organization. We successfully implemented GDUFA I. In the process of that, we also had to orchestrate major reorganizational changes in the center, including standing up OGD as a super office and standing up OPQ, Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, as a super office. We had to build and implement an entirely new IT infrastructure to manage the enormous workload of ANDAs and other types of submissions that have goal dates. And not just to manage them, but to do workflow management, assignment management, the whole spiel of work in the generic drug program, and to use that to create data for reports. There's reports posted on our website. There's mandatory reports to Congress, et cetera. The bottom line is that we are meeting or exceeding all of our GDUFA goals. Right now, we're actually in GDUFA II. We're 6 months into GDUFA II. So we are standing up and implementing GDUFA II. We are also doing the same with FDARA. That's the reauthorizing legislation for the user fees. And there are additional things that the agency has to do under FDARA. Many of them essentially are unfunded mandates to the office. And we are also closing out GDUFA I applications. So I want to pivot now to talk about GDUFA. For those of you who are new, I've already thrown that acronym out, sorry. Generic Drug User Fee Amendments. This is the user fee for the generic drug program. So in GDUFA I, there were goals for years 3, 4, and 5 with original submissions. These goals had shorter time over those 3 years and a larger percent that needed to meet those goals. Years 1 and 2 of GDUFA I did not have review goals. And we not just met those review goals on years 3, 4, and 5, but we exceeded the review goals for original application review. So not only original applications had goals, prior approval supplements as well did. And actually in GDUFA I, there were fees for prior approval supplements. There are no fees in GDUFA II. This horizontal red bar is the GDUFA goal. So very basic graphical understanding for people who freak out when they see data, but we exceeded in any given month the GDUFA goal for prior approval supplements. In addition, there were goals for controls. Controls are submissions by industry. They are drug development questions to the agency. And in GDUFA I, for several years, those had 2-month goals. There is essentially not the same IND framework that there is in new drug development, and that's what controls it does. It's interactions with the agency, answers specific to drug development. Again, the red horizontal line is the GDUFA goal. The agency exceeded that goal. And the agency did this at a time where there was much more work than was anticipated. And I have some data to show you on that. And in addition, throughout the 5 years of GDUFA I, we see increasing number of applications, increasing number of amendments, increasing number of controls. And there are new companies and more companies in the generic drug space and more facilities as a result of that. So this is my depiction of the original application submissions. The red horizontal line is what was projected to come in during GDUFA I. So in the negotiations, industry projected there would be 750 original applications that come in. So you can see in 4 of those 5 years, the number of submissions exceeded what was projected. And in 2 of these years, almost double what was projected. There were over 5,000 ANDAs submitted in GDUFA I. So I'll say that again, 5,000 ANDAs. All of them have GDUFA goal dates. That is 6.5 years worth of work sent to the agency in a 5-year period. So to give you some comparison, in the new drug side, NDA, submissions, PDUFA, world, prescription drug user fee, there's maybe about 150 NDAs submitted, and 30 or less are NMEs, new molecular entities. So many magnitudes more than what's in the new drug space. Not only are there a large number of submissions, they are highly variable month to month, and some months even 4-fold higher than a previous month. Every single one of these needs to be managed to meet those goal dates, irrespective of how many submissions industry sent to us in any given month. Somehow I'm back to my very first slide. Okay. I'll just rapidly get through it. Hopefully no one has a seizure disorder. So this part, again, 4-fold higher month to month. This program is a super high volume. This variability in volume makes it even more challenging to handle this program. The number of controls has increased substantially in the 5 years of GDUFA I. Almost triple the number of controls in year 5 than there were in year 3. There were over 8,000 controls submitted to the agency in GDUFA I, again, illustrating the magnitude and the volume in this program. And not only has the volume increased, but the complexity of controls has increased, actually such that there's a provision in GDUFA II about how to deal with complex controls. I provide for you the link here to the controls guidance. I ask you, I beg of you, if you're in the generic drug space or wanting to get into it, read that guidance and follow that guidance. Because even after 5 years of GDUFA and 8,000 controls, there's a large number of these who don't follow the controls. We've had 20% of controls that don't follow that guidance. So GDUFA I required the agency to have a review cycle and issue regulatory action by a particular time. That regulatory action could be an approval, a tentative approval, a complete response letter. So the complete response letter delineates the deficiencies in the application that industry has to correct before we can approve or tentatively approve. And the fourth regulatory action is a refuse to receive. Those are things industry doesn't like to get. Those are examples of where the application is not sufficiently complete for us to conduct scientific review, applications that fail to follow other types of requirements for submissions to the agency. I am not getting into RTRs at all in my presentation. There are people from the filing division who are going to come and talk about RTRs. At the end of the review cycle, you get regulatory action and it stops the clock. If we look at the world of submissions in GDUFA I, and we ask, what happened to those and where are they? This is where they are. As a matter of, this is data from the end of December, and this was recently updated to me last week after my slides were due. So I can say that of all the applications submitted in GDUFA I, 30% of them have been approved or tentatively approved. Another 30% are with the agency under review. They're under review, they have goal dates, they're within goal dates. And a little bit more than 30% of the applications are with industry. They've received a complete response letter, and we are waiting for industry to respond to that. So what happened at the end of that first review cycle in GDUFA I? That's what this slide is depicting for you. So at the end of the first review cycle, 12% of applications received an approval or a tentative approval. 12% of those applications received an RTR, or refused to receive. And over 50% of the applications at the end of the first review cycle received a complete response letter. So those applications were deficient and need to be revised by industry before we can approve or tentatively approve. How much time did it take us to get to those first actions? Again, years 1 and 2 of GDUFA did not have review goals for original applications. And you can see that in this graph. Each of these different colors represents those 4 different regulatory actions. Years 3, 4, and 5, median time to approval or median time to action parallels very nicely with what the review goals were, not surprisingly. Actually, again, demonstrating how responsive we've been to GDUFA. Another point looking at here is the 4th bar in any one of these cohort years, which to me is purple. Other computers, it may look different. That is the time to RTR. And you can see that time has dropped considerably from year 1 to year 3, such that industry is getting filing decisions in real time, whether it's acceptable for filing or whether you're getting RTRs within 2 months. During GDUFA, the agency has issued record numbers of approvals and tentative approvals. You can see an increasing trend of approvals and tentative approvals from year 2 all the way through to year 5. And the record number of approvals for year 4 actually was the highest number ever in the history of the generic drug program. And we even beat that in year 5. So 2 consecutive years with record number of approvals and tentative approvals in the GDUFA program. This slide here, I want to demonstrate median time to approval by cohort year. Now, Ted Sherwood is going to have some median time to approval that's different than mine. I feel really strongly about reporting this by cohort year. Dr. Woodcock feels really strongly about doing this. And actually, this is how it's reported in our annual reports to Congress. So this, these first 3 years, time to approval, actually represents multiple review cycles. Applications that received CRs, corrections from industry, but multiple cycles to get to approval. Years 4 and 5 actually reflect ANDAs that were approved at the end of the first cycle. Year 4, a little bit of these had more than one cycle. You can see that because that's longer than a first cycle in GDUFA I. What I anticipate, however, while this trend line looks great, I'm sure everybody's happy to see this, I anticipate that this trend line is going to flatten out over time. And the reason is, based on my previous data, over 50% of the ANDAs get a complete response at the end of a review cycle. And we know that it takes multiple cycles to approval. And we also know that almost 20% of ANDAs that get a CR are still with industry 12 months later. So years 4 and 5, in my mind, are the best of the best. Or as Ted says, the fastest 5 and 10%. These are the best. So best case is what you're seeing in years 4 and 5. But I want to walk you through a more realistic case. Very basic science here, okay? An application is submitted. We're going to assume standard review times, no priority, nothing like that. First review cycle has a 10-month goal, so 10 months. It goes back to industry with deficiencies. Industry needs to correct those deficiencies and send an amendment to the agency. It takes industry 12 months to do that. It's a major amendment, so there is a 10-month review goal on that. So a more realistic idea, thinking about that, is that median time to approval here would be 32 months. The first cycle approval rates in GDUFA, while much better than prior to GDUFA, are still very low and considerably lower than they are in the new drug space or the PDUFA cycle. Before GDUFA, less than 1% received a first cycle approval. In years 3, 4, and 5, and I only put 3, 4, and 5 because in conversations with industry, as we implemented GDUFA I, industry said, you, FDA, will be getting better applications when we start getting goal dates. So we see 10 to 15% first cycle approvals when you're getting goal dates. So this is a very low percentage. It leads to highly inefficient use of resources, both at the agency and at industry. And I cannot emphasize this enough. It is absolutely critical for applications to be right when they're submitted to us. So that interval between when industry gets a CR and when they respond with their amendment to us actually has some consequences. The longer that takes, there's going to be changes. So there's going to be changes in the staff who are reviewing your application. Likely leading to, again, inefficiencies. It's going to take them time to catch up to speed. It will be the first time they've picked it up. If there's been a long interval, there are likely changes in our standards. We've probably issued new guidance. We've revised old guidance. There's been changes in the USP monograph. There's been changes to ICH or other types of requirements. There's obviously been changes in the RLD. You all know that because those change quite frequently. But on industry side, you guys probably have changes that also impact the review. You might have had a change in your facility status. You might have added or actually taken away a facility to which we need to evaluate how important the data from that facility are to the application. You may have had a change in or a new contract manufacturer. So I want to pivot now and talk a little bit about regulatory science and regulatory science in the GDUFA drug program. So GDUFA I was the first user fee program that actually had a regulatory science program. And these newer revised user fee cycles in other areas outside of drugs actually are starting to emulate that with reg science programs. In my mind, this program is the largest component to the success of the GDUFA program. This has a substantial return on investment for industry. In GDUFA I, this program published almost 800 product-specific guidances, and almost 300 of them were for complex generic drugs. Additionally, this program actually provided the foundational elements and the infrastructure for the pre-ANDA program in GDUFA II. Someone will be coming to you later in this two-day seminar to talk about this pre-ANDA program. And I want to posit three reasons for why this program is so important and so successful. One, it develops and validates methods. So it's essentially a standards-setting program. Two, it streamlines generic drug product development, and it also streamlines our regulatory review and decision-making. And three, it enhances the public and medical community's acceptance of generic drugs. Let me walk you through each one of these things. All of the research conducted in this regulatory science program is conducted in the public domain. There are over 100 contracts and grants to external researchers, and some of our own internal research. But all of the results are public. All of the results benefit all of industry. If industry was doing this research, it would be yours. You would have proprietary information about that, and you would not share it with the rest of the generic industry. We know that. This program allows our scientists and our reviewers to stay abreast of advances in the field. This research is conducted following the scientific method. So for those scientists in the room, hypothesis-driven, the reproducibility of data, meaning some of these studies are conducted by multiple different investigators at different sites, demonstrating the reproducibility. Additionally, pressure testing the work before we set the standards. So an example I have here is of a bioequivalence study that was done with 8-way crossover. Pressure testing that's the way we want to demonstrate bioequivalence. We're not asking industry to do 8-way crossover studies, but we're pressure testing it before we put those standards out there. Additionally, these guidances represent alignment across the agency. They've been seen, they've been developed with other disciplines in CDER, and as well with some of these complex drug-device combinations, even with CDRH. This program streamlines development. I just have one example here for you. Prior to GDUFA, the adhesion guidance recommended that there be 600 subjects. From the research in GDUFA and our ability to use different statistical methodologies and such, this guidance now recommends 60 subjects, obviously streamlining development. Additionally, we are working towards the development of in vitro characterization aspects for certain products versus having to conduct a large clinical endpoint study. There are even guidances published in GDUFA I that describe how to do this in vitro characterization. And lastly, as I said, this streamlines our reviews. So if industry follows product-specific guidances, at the end of the first cycle of bioequivalence review, 75% of those applications are bioequivalent accurate. Okay. So a green light from bioequivalence. Additionally, we see that there's a higher approval rate for applications that follow PSG's, product-specific guidances, versus those that don't. And lastly, this program enhances acceptance. So the epilepsy community was highly skeptical about generic drugs. This program funded research with investigators in the epilepsy community. They conducted the research. And they concluded at the end of that you can demonstrate bioequivalence with generic drugs. This Epilepsy Foundation went out with a public position statement that endorsed generic drug substitution. That's a big deal. That's a big deal for you because if there's clinicians out there saying don't substitute, then your generic products are not going to be used. And like most science, it evolves over time. We know that science is evolutionary. And we know that it's evolutionary as we learn more things about the products. We learn more things about drug products in the real world settings. We learn more in the post-market setting. We learn more when the RLD has to have post-market commitments or post-market requirements. And we learn more, obviously, as there's advances in the field. At the time of approval, the application needs to meet the current standards for approval. So I want to pivot and do a very brief about GDUFA II. Here's the link to the goals letter or commitment letter. Again, I ask you to please read this. If you want to be developing generic drugs and submitting applications to the agency, please read the commitment letter. This slide highlights some of the areas that are new or different in GDUFA II, and several of the presenters through the next 2 days will be talking about these. The high-level commitment under GDUFA II was to increase first cycle approvals and decrease the number of cycles to approval. The way that the agency is committing to doing that is that for new original applications, information requests and mid-cycle discipline review letters from the various disciplines will be issued to the applicant. So a little TLC during first cycle review, hoping to increase first cycle approvals and hence decrease cycles to approval. As I said, 56% of ANDAs had a complete response at the end. So although this slide is not unique to GDUFA II, that determination of whether it's a major or a minor is decided based upon how much time the agency thinks it's going to take to review that, not how quickly industry can respond. Because sometimes you have the data. You can send it to us right away. We haven't seen the data. It's going to take us time to review it. So while we committed to IRs and DRLs during original submissions, there is no commitment from the agency to provide IRs and DRLs during amendment review. So again, asking industry to build the quality in their applications upfront and upon submission. We will strive, however, to provide IRs and DRLs if we can, if our resources allow, when we're doing amendment review. And I do want to say, though, about minor amendments. So minor amendments have a 3-month review clock. So you should not expect that you're going to get IRs and DRLs during a 3-month review clock. It's not possible. There's not enough time. You will be getting CRs from one discipline because that may be all that's left. And contrary to some blog or a blog that's out there that says that labeling is easy, labeling is not easy. Many of you have seen multiple CRs just because of labeling issues. These are some of the most complex legal and regulatory challenges that the agency has. When you respond with those respond to those IRs and DRLs, we have the option to do one of 3 things. We can review your response, we can defer reviewing your response to the next cycle, or we can set a new review goal date. And if industry sends an amendment during an active review cycle, essentially, we can do the same 3 things. And the amendments guidance even specifically points out that we can extend the goal date. So if you have critical information that you know we need to know about before we can approve your application, we encourage you to send that to us. And I specifically mentioned elemental impurities here, and I will get to that in a minute. We've published guidances and maps to explain our policies in GDUFA II. These are hyperlinks that can take you to that. We did multiple outreach videos that explain GDUFA II. Again, these are hyperlinks. And we are collaborating with the Drug Information Association, or DIA, doing webinars and podcasts. Several of these are specific to, to complex generic drugs, and also to methodologies and modeling that will help with generic drug product development. So I want to end here with some reminders to industry. We at the agency, we see all of the companies. We see all of the applications. So we kind of see the landscape of the generic world. What we see is that companies that have a robust understanding of the regulatory environment, those are the companies that have a competitive edge. And I don't mean a robust regulatory environment, meaning you have a great reg affairs group that knows how to call the project manager and get updates on your application. What I mean is this: being very proactive in the regulatory arena at the agency, staying up to date with what's going on at the agency, frequently monitor the Federal Register, monitor FDA websites and Twitter feeds, and subscribe to a variety of our listservs. Monitor our guidances, because guidances get revised. Absolutely monitor changes at USP. Industry is responsible for knowing about the changes to the RLD label and any REMS modifications. And when you're aware of them, you need to revise your applications. And the last example I want to end with on being proactive is this elemental impurities issue. This is a statutory requirement. It went into effect January 1st of this year. Industry was amply notified about this because this was years in the making, and there were multiple presentations at multiple scientific conferences explaining this to industry. Not being proactive is what resulted in less applications that got approved or tentatively approved in January or February. As a matter of fact, the applicants who are in January and February here are the ones that were proactive. So I want to close with just an analogy here to the prescription drug user fee program. This program has shorter times to approval, higher first cycle approvals, and 25 years worth of user fee experience. This is what happens when applications are right the first time. They're right when they're submitted. This demonstrates the benefits of a user fee program with increased resources and improved efficiencies at the agency. You're going to be hearing more in the next 2 days about other efficiencies that we're building in. And it also demonstrates some of the benefits of goal date extensions in the new drug world. So I think I've demonstrated quite clearly that we have built a high-quality generic drug program during GDUFA. We've issued record numbers of approvals and tentative approvals. But we still have a long way to go. And I say we, the agency and industry. There's a high rate of refuse to receive, there's low first cycle approvals, and a high number of complete response letters after review. So I'm going to close there. I'm going to wish you a wonderful 2 days, a large learning experience and all that. And I am tasked with the honor of introducing our next